Hello everyone, welcome to the Longhouse. This is Contemporary Asian Australian Performance's third Longhouse of the year, and third time is a charm because we have gone global for the first time. My name is Arisa Yura. I'll be your facilitator today. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the Wangal people, the traditional custodians of the land on which I am hosting this meeting today. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you are all on today, and all the First Nations people that are participating in this meeting. I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and to the Aboriginal people that continue to care for country. I stand for a society that profoundly respects and acknowledges Indigenous perspectives, culture, language, and history, and continue to fight for Indigenous justice and rights, paving way for a strong future. So you've currently tuned into the Longhouse program, which consists of panel discussions and seminars designed to share information, network, and build the community. Longhouse is produced by Contemporary Asian Australia Performance, known as CAAP. CAAP is Australia's professional arts organisation led by Annette Shun, who is also one of our panellists today. We develop and champion Asian Australian artists and performance by providing pathways to a more resilient, more diverse, enriching community. I just want to let everybody know that we will be recording this talk. So can I please ask everyone to turn off your cameras now and your microphone until the end of the discussion when we'll have a Q&A. So what you want to do is click the little icons that look like a camera and a microphone. So they have red lines through them. We recommend you use gallery view so you can see all the beautiful panelists' faces. That's just a button at the top of your screen where you can toggle between speaker view and gallery view. For gallery view, we also recommend you hide non-video participants. I actually only learned this feature the other day and it's really useful. So I'm going to share my screen now to show you how to do it. Here we go. Share screen. Sorry. Here we go. So what you do is, I'm sorry. You go to the top left corner, zoom.us. I think that's for Mac users. It'll be under the settings, so it's called preferences. And then you will see video tab, and then you go to click on hide non-video participants, which is at the sort of second bottom there. And once you've done that, it activates. Yes, so that's it. I hope you were able to do that. If by any chance you were not able to do it, if you struggle to do it, you can keep it on speaker view. So you can only see when someone's talking. And feel free to use the chat box to ask questions to the panelists and interact with each other throughout the event. And let us know where you're all tuning in from. Okay, so I would now like to introduce our incredible panelists who has so generously joined us from across all time zones. First up, we have Snehal Desai in Los Angeles. Snehal is the producing artist director of East West Players, the largest Asian American theatre company and the longest running theatre of color in the US. As an artistic leader, he has sought to raise awareness on social issues that affect Angelenos by personalizing them through storytelling. And then we have David E. in Toronto. David is a mixed race actor and playwright born and raised in Toronto. He is the co-founding artistic director of Fu Jen Asian Canadian Theatre Company, Canada's premier professional Asian Canadian theatre company. He has worked extensively in the Asian Canadian community as an artist and advocate. And Annette Shun in Sydney. Annette is a writer, broadcaster, producer, and theatre maker. She's the executive producer of Contemporary Asian Australian Performance, where she has been highly influential in forging professional pathways for Asian Australian artists. She was appointed in 2020 as Artistic Director of Adelaide Festival Centre's OzAsia Festival. Welcome everyone, it is so great to have you all today. I just want to let you know that Kumiko, she may be able to join us halfway. I'm not sure when she might be able to join, but at the moment she's unavailable. So, oh, hello. Thank you. For those of you who just joined us, would you be able to turn your video off and unmute until the end of the discussion? Thank you so much. Great, thank you so much. So I just want to say to all the panelists, I think there is really no better time than now to connect with you so that we can together look to ideas and find interesting ways to move forward. And to kickstart the conversation today, I would like to ask a question. So almost all live performance, as we know, has been shut down and come to a complete halt. Even though each country or each city is faced with different restrictions that are constantly changing, it has demanded a significant shift in our lives and the way we may operate within our industry. So the question is, as leaders of companies that produce and support live theatre works, how has each of your company dealt with the pandemic, and how have you changed or adapted to continue telling your stories?
Perhaps I can start?
Yeah, anyway.
Because being the newest and smallest company out of the four of us, so for us it's been about recovering from the shock of the enormous impact of the pandemic to start with, and losing, you know, everything that we had planned to do in terms of creative developments and touring and presentation. And so really the only thing we could do was think about how we could support our artists. There's Kumiko. Hello, Kumiko.
You guys joined us. Thank you.
You're on mute, Kumiko.
You won't believe this, but both my alarms did not go off.
Oh no!
I am so sorry. I've been awake quite a lot of the night. I must have fallen asleep again. So apologies, and lovely to see everybody.
Yeah, that's nice to have you with us, and we should mention we've asked all the participants to turn their cameras off until we get to the question and answer. That's why you can't see them, but I think we have about 50 or 60 people joining.
Oh, wonderful!
Watching us.
I'm so sorry.
I'd like to quickly introduce Kumiko because she's joined us now. Sorry, Annette, I just
good idea.
Had in there for a second. Kumiko, this is Kumiko Mendl in London. Kumiko is Artistic Director and CEO of the award-winning Yellow Earth Theatre, the UK's longest established British East and Southeast Asian theatre company, celebrating 25 years this year. She has worked as an actor, director, producer, and teacher over a 30-year career. She co-founded the first BESEA summer school in London, Yellow Earth Academy. Thank you, Kumiko.
Thank you. Thank you. Lovely to be here. Lovely to meet you all.
Thank you. And I've just asked the panelists the question about how, as leaders of the companies, how that support live theatre works. How has each of you dealt with this pandemic, and how has things sort of changed, or how have you changed or adapted to continue telling the stories you want to tell?
Yes, so I mean, for us, we are a national touring theatre company, so we are funded by Arts Council England, and that's our remit. So obviously during this whole period we've not been able to do any touring, and although we're not in a situation where we have a building, so that's really, you know, that's meant that we have had resources that we were going to spend on a show production at the end of this year in particular, because we're funded to do one major tour a year. Often what happens is we do a lot of co-productions. So that production, we were hoping when shutdown happened, hit for us, it was the end of March, we were still hoping by the end of end of this year, we'd be doing our production. And then obviously as time went on, it gradually became clearer that that's not possible. So we have been then pivoting and looking at different ways of how we could use some of that money we put aside for the production. So we have got a number of things coming up quite shortly at the end of this month. One is a live piece that will be in Manchester. We hope. Manchester is one of the areas that's been really badly hit in the UK with coronavirus. So we're still planning to do a live event that's part of Signal Fires, which is a big national event by touring companies to light fires across the country to show and raise attention and highlight the danger that the industry is in, as well as bringing hope, you know, and gathering people together, bringing us back to the idea of fire and telling stories around fire, back to the basics of theatre. So we're doing that in Manchester, and we've also got a digital programme of new plays. So what we did run is all our academies that we do every year. We brought them forward and we put them all on Zoom. So we were able to connect with young people across the country. We did a UK-wide academy, which was for actors. We did a performers academy in Manchester, as well as writers academy. We did one in Birmingham, which were all pre-planned as well. And then we did our professional writers program. So we were able to bring things online and connect with people that way, which was amazing. And I know for a lot of people, it was a real, you know, a moment for them to be able to have something regular in their diary, to be able to connect in with other artists and to be, you know, keep creative. So that was really, really important. And out of our professional writers program, we have 17 very short plays, excuse me, that we will then be presenting as a digital play festival. Again, we were hoping we might be able to do it live, but that hasn't happened, but we're doing it as a digital version, and that will be happening on the 30th of October, because we're marking our 25th anniversary at the end of the month. That was another thing that was happening this year. So we had a big program lined up, hoping for a physical party, and we kept holding for that physical party, and now we've got a rule of 6. We can't have a physical party unless we had 6 people in at a time. So, and it just feels also, at this point in time, it doesn't feel right to be spending lots of money on something like a party. So we're holding a Zoom raise the glass moment at the end of when we stream our plays, and that will be on the 30th of October. So please look out on the 30th of October, because we're also having a bit of a rebrand, and there's a bit of an announcement to make. So yeah, we've got quite a few things planned. So we've been keeping very busy, which is good. And of course, I'm sorry I missed everybody's introductions and what everyone else is doing, but we've been having lots of conversations. That's been a major thing. We've actually been having, you know, talking to people we wouldn't normally talk to, our colleagues who are running, you know, touring companies. The whole Signal Fires came around because we have a regular producing and touring company meeting. So we've been getting to know the other touring companies, and we're all different sizes, we do all different types of work, but it's been brilliant. You know, that's been really good and positive. And yes, of course, we've been looking at all sorts of, you know, we've had time to reflect and pause and think about what we're doing, how we can come back better, stronger. Obviously, with the Black Lives Movement has had a massive impact on our industry as well. And we're hoping that will continue through time. And yeah, we're still working through those things at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, you're the first to respond to that question. So yeah, you haven't missed everybody else's they're up to. So yeah, well, anyone else? Annette, you were, yeah, sharing your.
Yes, very exciting, Kumiko. Yeah, so we have swung into whatever could be done via Zoom or digitally as well. And the Longhouse, this has been our main thing. Usually we get together in a room and have a panel discussion or a workshop, and then everyone mingles for an hour or so over some food and drinks. And it's been a great way of building a community of Asian Australian artists and arts workers. But because we weren't able to do it, we've transported it into the online world. And the great thing about that is that we can do it outside Sydney. So firstly, we were able to connect to other cities in Australia, and now with this one, obviously around the world. And I believe we have some international participants watching us as well, joining us today. So that's been a really exciting thing to be able to connect. One of the other things we're involved in was a project called Dear Australia, which was run by what was formerly our sort of peak playwriting organisation in Australia, Playwriting Australia, in which 25 small to medium companies were able to nominate 2 playwrights, and each of them were asked to write a monologue to Australia, Dear Australia. And this was in the middle of the worst of the first wave of the pandemic. And then all of these monologues were performed by an artist. So, 50 playwrights, 50 artists, and then all of those were live streamed across 3 weekends, I think, or 3 nights. So that was, a whole lot of new work that was created, and all of those monologues will now be published and available, so that next time people go to audition, they've got new monologues to choose from. And the other thing we are doing is an artist lab, our first very experimental artist lab, which we're running in collaboration with the 3 biggest theatre companies in Sydney, Sydney Theatre Company, Belvoir and Griffin. So we are focusing on doing what we can to support artists while we are unable to present anything to audiences.
Yeah. David or Snehal?
I can go. Hi. I should say that I'm coming from Toronto, which is also known as Takaranto on Turtle Island. We are Treaty 13 territory, also known as the Dish with One Spoon territory, and we are the traditional land of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat. And thank you for having me. So yeah, when the pandemic hit for us, we were in the middle of, we were just about to step up our planning and execution of an international theater conference and festival that was bringing people in from all over the world. And it was when our keynote, who was coming from Singapore, wrote us and was like, I don't think my university is going to let me go. That was in like late Feb, early March, and so we just kind of slowed everything down to everything ground to a halt. So yeah, sort of, I guess, luckily we had been already planning to investigate how to create and different creation methodologies using digital only platforms. So we were able to pivot rather quickly. We started with immersive, like one-on-one Zoom performances by commissioning artists to create just sort of micro performances that were then executed via Zoom. We couldn't figure out payment platforms, so we did it all for free, but decided to try out letting audiences tip artists, because one of the most important things for us was that artists would still had some sort of revenue coming in, because they'd lost everything else. And so a lot of what we were doing was like, okay, how can we pay people and keep paying people, and not, especially being an Asian Canadian theater company, it's already difficult enough to keep our artists in the mix and employed. We kind of felt it to be our responsibility to keep them somewhat gainfully employed. So yeah, so we did that. We've been commissioning a lot, both traditional plays and plays for the end times, and we're investigating, we're doing a deep dive into XR, so like VR, virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. We've been, I was just in a VR conference earlier today. And so the mark of the visor from my VR headset is just beginning to fade from my face. So yeah, that's sort of where we're at. We're trying to stay nimble, stay reactive. Things change weekly. Like we just today in Toronto, we had our all of our restrictions rolled back. So we were, we had been at a place where movie theaters were open. They were doing in-person dining at restaurants, movie theater or gyms were open. And as of today, all of that's been closed. So it's just sort of, we're constantly on a precipice. And so we don't want to, we're resisting the urge to make really solid plans and announce months in advance the way that we normally would, just to allow us to stay nimble and react to things as they happen.
Yeah, absolutely, isn't it? Like, we just don't really know what's going to happen tomorrow.
I have no idea. Yeah, everything looked okay like even 2 weeks ago.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, for Australia, like Sydney, we are in a really fortunate place where we haven't had, I mean, we sort of had a few community transmission recently, but Melbourne's in a complete lockdown still, really. So even within the country, there's just varying, climate. Snehal, would you like to share?
Thank you, Arisa and Annette, for bringing all of us together. And I'm coming to you from the traditional lands of the Tongva and the Chumash people here in Los Angeles. I think I just want to echo pretty much what everyone's doing. It's interesting how we've all kind of adapted in similar ways and programming. So I think for us, we were in the midst of our largest main stage production was about to start previews, and we were going to launch our Theater for Youth tour. And then we were in preparations for our gala. So all of those things were on hold, and it took a little while to pivot out of them. But I think right away what we knew was that also that this is a time where our communities are under attack. So there was a lot of heated rhetoric, particularly here in the US, around COVID-19 coronavirus and it being called like the Chinese virus and all of these other things, and our leadership kind of stoking those flames. And so, as we looked at how we wanted to pivot, we knew it was important to stay visible and vocal. And then it was also important to be an ally in this moment, particularly around Black Lives Matter and a lot of the other things that were happening. And so we have this series called Counterculture, and we basically pivoted two parts of it. One was this series that we call East West Wednesdays that became these social action or social justice dialogues. We talked about racism within communities of color. We talked about thriving in this time. We revisited shows that we had done before and how they resonate in this moment. And then we wanted to mix it with, something that was also allowed us to exhale a little bit and celebrate our artists. So we have this series that we do with this artist, AJ Raphael, called Crazy Talented Asians. And so we moved that online, and we've done a couple of those episodes. And what's wonderful about that is it's a variety show formats. We have songs, we have monologues, we have a number of things, but it just allowed folks to to escape a little bit from everything that was happening. And so those programs have continued, and then, you know, all of our classes went online. And I think, like Kumiko was talking about, we've seen a huge surge in numbers for those as they've gone online. So typically we offer 2 or 3 classes in the fall, and I think we're up to 9 or 10 now. And we're just seeing students from across the country and around the world enrolling, because the issues of finding access to acting classes where your teachers are people of color and understand, aren't trying to make you hide or mask your accent, you know what I mean? Or, you know, or encouraging you to bring your whole self into the room. It's still not everywhere. And so I think we're seeing that. And then we started to realize that the folks who love theater, though they may not be able to leave, still love it. So we've moved into some of these non-practitioner classes. We offer a class on musical theater and one on iconic Asian American works that I would say a little more academic based, but they're, you know, they're meant to be to celebrate theater and to enjoy that. So that's how we pivoted. And I think, as David was saying, the interesting thing is, I think all of us we have definitely been on the reactive side of things. And now that we know we're going to be in this for a while, particularly I would say in North America, how we can be leading in, you know, less on the defensive and more on the offensive moving forward.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's really, I think, important this time to sort of use it as an opportunity to see this as a way to move things forward. And I think some of you actually sort of touched on talking about this a bit, but I'm actually also interested in, because we all share this Asian diasporic community within the Western society, as the storytellers from that community, has the current situation affected the kind of stories you want to tell? Sorry, I'm not sure whether that question was clear, but I've been so, I guess, interested in the context. There's any changes in the content in what the sort of stories?
Yeah, I mean, I think it. I'll start. I think it's definitely affected in that you just. It's like we're all kind of like, okay, what are we going to tell? The other thing is we program so far in advance. So now the challenge is we all have things in the pipeline, and but the question is, will all of that still be relevant and resonate on the other side of this? But the hard thing is there has been a commitment to those artists, and folks have been working on those projects for a while. So I think it's been that, and then, you know, we're gonna be, yes, in a new place afterwards. And I think right now our artistic communities are finding their way through that. And I do think, you know, the way we gather, the way our productions happen will change. The one that I keep thinking about is time, and that, you know, now things are 5 minutes and 10-minute segments, and online they're 20 minutes, or it's an hour seems long. So the way, you know, now this format of 90 minutes or 2 hours with an intermission, it's going to feel, I think, outdated in some ways, or it's going to feel challenging. So I think time is going to be different. And I think time is interesting because as a Western construct, it's very, very linear. And in Eastern traditions, it's circular. And so I think, how can that then lend itself to a different type of storytelling that is, you know, that has a circular worldview of time and being. And so I think there's moments where these things can really break open, because I would say for us here in the US, we still operate in a very narrow frame of what performance is on a whole scale. It tends to still be naturalism, realism, you know, Aristotelian technique at its core. And I think there's ways to bring in the power of the storytelling that Eastern cultures, which tend to be less text-based and more movement and ritual based, into the work that we're doing.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, also other panelists, please feel free to ask questions to each other or jump in. Anyone?
Yeah,
else?
I think I think like apropos to that, like time is also something that we're is a sort of a constant negotiation, and you know, like looking at micro performance, looking at like grouping work together to you know, form like more of a curatorial experience in work, rather than like this is the thing that you're watching for the next 2 hours of your life. Like offering selection. The thing that I'm sort of noticing in at least the artist proposals that I'm getting, in the artistic conversations that I'm having with colleagues and peers, is thinking about community in a different way. And I think that it's especially relevant to the Asian Canadian community, to a diasporic community, that is it's just something that is undergoing a bit of a renegotiation of what community means when we and what isolation means, and how we continue to make meaning in art, and who we're making that meaning for. Or yeah, those are sort of the conversations that we're having.
Yeah, I've had a sense that a lot of organisations, and not just us, are rethinking some really fundamental questions about what they're doing and why they're doing it and who they're doing it for. And I've had a sense here in Australia, in the whole sector, more thinking about being a bit more local. Before the pandemic, there was this really big sort of, everybody wanted to get bigger and wider, and all this talk about international collaboration and all this sort of stuff was going on. And suddenly I think that people are thinking more about the local and about local communities, and engaging more about the people around them. And so that has been a shift. And there's also been, I guess, a more caring attitude about the work we're making, and why and how we are making it, with a greater concern for the audience than has seemed apparent in the past, just as a general thing right across the board. So I think that that's really been a really nice shift, a really great shift within our sector. And for us, of the Asian Australian community, I guess being a small company has allowed us, I guess, to be more open and flexible than perhaps companies like yours who have to plan so far ahead. The Dear Australia project was one that just showed how you can respond really quickly. And I guess some of those new platforms we're all looking at could make quicker responses and more immediate responses somehow a bit more possible. But in the longer term, I think people still are also itching to get back into the theatres and having that live experience, that two-way communication between audience and performer.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think particularly what Snehal said about having a programme of work that, you know, we feel committed to with the artists that we've been working with, and how, you know, we still would like to see that happen is really interesting, and something, you know, we hope to be able to come back eventually. But do we want to come back to, you know, in the same way that we were doing it before? Because a lot of things for us were not working, particularly the sort of the touring model. In terms of the work that we have been doing, we were working already with our writers, and in fact they were working on an idea for a longer play, and so they actually were writing a little pitch play, 5 pages long, and that was all, you know, that was happening before. We were thinking about doing that before the lockdown. So in fact now we've ended up with these very short 5-page plays, and they're an enormous, you know, range of subject matter, and it's very much from the writer what they were wanting to you know, their ideas, what they wanted to develop. So I think it'll be really interesting now to see them, and they're recording them at the moment, and then we'll stream them, but to see what resonates, you know, because they weren't writing with the pandemic in mind, but we will see what will come from that, and you know what that will bring. But I think I mean, another project we're doing is something which is actually a project discovering Japanese women's lives in the UK since 1945. We have quite a scattered community in a sense, and they've come from different reasons. It's not been a mass migration, but it's something quite personal to me because my mother's Japanese, and so we're doing a lot of interviews. And the project is also called Tsunagu Connect, and it is about connecting with that generation and connecting now, and that sort of resonated a lot about how we connect in these times, how we can, you know, what are our relationships if they're over digital, you know, how do we connect? How do we connect without touching or seeing and, you know, being with people? And that's throwing up some sort of fundamental sort of ways of thinking, how can we do these? You know, how what is the future going to be like if we're living with this virus for quite a while? And I think also there were some things, I think there's a lot more to come, and we're working through it. Everybody's working through it, and you know what that sense is, and that will come out in the work as we work with a lot of different writers. That will come from them. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. And I think, you know, a lot of the things that are happening, as Kumiko said, they were already issues and problems we were dealing with, and now it feels like with COVID, they've just the time has just sped up, right? So it was already being nimble and flexible. All of us have been trying to find models where you don't have to program 4 or 5 or 6 shows in advance or announce full seasons, right? And now, you know, flexibility is the name of the game, and that kind of model of being. And I think all of the hesitation, audiences won't take it, you know, all of that is now out the door because there aren't many other options. And then I think access is radically different now. So everyone can access all of our companies, right? In ways that maybe they didn't know us or they weren't aware. And so now through the digitization, everyone has access to us. And it's a question then when we're back in person, then do we keep, you know, tickets at the price that they are? Do we, you know, I mean, do those barriers come back, or are they different? Or will there always be a hybrid where there's an in-person component and now something digital that others can do? And then I think the other thing was, as David talked about, was immersive and interactive work. So I think we were more, the trends were towards folks wanting to be in the experience, right? Or the experience built around them. And I think that was happening in the punch drunk model and things like that. But now it's with VR and AR and all this, the technology is allowing you to be in the center of a theatrical experience that then is built around you, and then you can go from there. So I think it's interesting because a lot of these things were kicking around. And then the other thing is we can't use a lot of our spaces. So it forces our hand to go into the communities we say we want to work with and serve, like to act, you know what I mean? To do that, and that grassroots work is the other thing. And I do think the themes are gonna be, I think the numbness was a big theme anyways in our modern society. And now it's gonna be numbness, as David said, isolation, and then connection that are gonna be the things that are gonna resonate.
Yeah, it is. We are, you're right, absolutely with the time, like everything has just really caught up to us. And just before I throw it to the floor, I would, and some of you have mentioned, the connections, and also Annette has said that things have gone local, but what I have been wondering is, just quickly, do you think now we are connected, like us, do you think there's a way we can all work together? Do you think that can happen, or do you think it's useful? Take your time. Seriously, like it's definitely a bit of a, I just threw it out.
I think we can all work together. Is that the question?
Yeah, like us.
I mean, yeah. I mean, absolutely. Like there's always been that. I mean, I've worked with Yellow Earth. I've worked with East West Players. We've, you know, I've worked with
It's fine, just
Arisa.
leave it. Sorry, I'm having problems with my lighting. Carry on.
Right. I thought that was like a direction at me. Yeah, I mean, like you know, we were always the opportunity to share, to engage across you know, across the borders that we've that existed before. Like we've always, I think, had that inclination that like that we, you know, we have a lot more in common than not. And the work that I think we're all making, at least like the work that East West Players does, the work that Yellow Earth does, like that has all that's all been really informative in my personal practice. It's been informative in how I lead the company. Like the influence of all of our organizations is, I think, felt throughout.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I would agree. I think at least in particular, I know David's work as a writer as well, and we run a international play reading festival every year, so that's one way that we can reach out and connect people across the seas, as it were. But in terms of, I suppose, undertaking a co-production or an actual piece together takes a lot of time and resource, and we have done work in the past, but never with our English-speaking companies. I think we've worked in Hong Kong and in China and so forth, but it's something I'd really be interested to explore what that might mean. We're looking at AR for our Tsunaga Connect project, in fact, and it'd be great to have a conversation about that with you, David. Yeah. That sort of exchange of ideas and just brings more ideas to the surface, and looking at ways that we can connect. But we do have so much in common. It is quite incredible. I mean, I look at everybody's website and everyone's mission and vision and aims, and there's so much that we're doing that overlaps and very much share similar values. So it just makes total sense if we were to work together going forward, and learning from each other, and our communities and how their similarities and differences. So this is just a great opportunity just to do that, to bring people together. So it's good.
And I think artistic exchange is just such a vital part of what we do as artistic leaders, and disseminate that to our community and make broader communities.
I think it's a wonderful opportunity just to compare notes, really, on the situation in each of our countries, and there would be many similarities as well as differences that would be really interesting to explore. But I guess also that perspective from the diaspora, from whichever particular culture that you look at, that there would be a different take from the Chinese American as opposed to the Chinese in the UK, or Chinese Australians, or the Indians in the States compared to Indians in the UK, Indians, South Asians in Australia. I think that there'd be so much that hasn't been explored because we haven't gone there yet, that could be really interesting. And I was thinking also about, with all that has been happening with geopolitics and the difficulty with freedom of expression in some of the countries in Asia at the moment. I also wonder about what the perspectives looking back at Asia from our diasporic communities might yield in terms of new perspectives and new material as well, if we are not constrained in quite the same way as people who are still living in those societies are constrained in terms of freedom of expression. So these are just sort of ideas that have been sparking off that I thought could lead us to form some sort of connection or alliance in examining those sorts of things. Could be quite interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting because in going kind of global due to COVID, we've become more localized in our forms, so that, you know, the thought of doing a touring production here in the US that goes international, you know, no one wants us in the world right now. So our passports are not very effective. So I think it's gonna end up having to be a new model of operation, you know what I mean? And I think it's also because we need to be nimble and flexible. You know, a lot of companies here in the US will bring, you know, artists from New York to Los Angeles for a show and stuff like that. But if you're having to open and close for weeks and days at a time because of an outbreak or this, or you end up having to stay as local as possible so you can be as flexible as possible. But that doesn't mean then that we can't develop works together. They can't be kind of rolling world premieres. And I want to lift up something I think Jules said, that you know, the thing that her comment was super invested in decolonial notions of time when Western conditioning around time is being fractured so dramatically. And the interesting thing is the through line for all of us is colonization, is being colonial entities, right? And being, you know, and sometimes it's the country, the original diaspora country we were in, and then the country we're in now, have all been colonized. And so a lot of what we're, you know, I think we're really trying to look at is how can you break apart that, right? How can we shatter that system of organization and of being? And it's tied to capitalism. It's tied to other forms of being and gathering. But I think that's where, you know, there may be something new for us, because that's where there's universality in our situation. And then in the other cases, I think, yes, it's very different. I love being Indian American. I love going to the UK, because as soon as I open my mouth, the first thing people see is an American, not someone who is, you know, Indian American, someone who's brown, like, you know, in the terrorist mentality here in the US sometimes. So I think there are interesting stories and experiences in all of that that could come. And I think it's, you know, the other thing is here in the US, we have a very transactional relationship with our artists. And it's trying to figure out how now to build institutions where the artists are at the center of that, because they are the ones in a lot of ways that have been left out in the cold and are really challenging. And they're the one, you know what I mean, who changed the world with their work. So that is the big question, is what does that model look like, and how can we move into it, you know, from here on out.
Yes. And Annette, sorry, I saw you wanting to. No, sorry.
Yeah, that was a really good point about artists, because I mean, for us, you know, the industry is made up 70% of freelancers, and they've been really and as our company, we work with, you know, majority of freelancers. There's only three of us in the office who are actually paid by the company, and only me who's full time. So it's very small. We're a very small operation, and we really, you know, artists make us who we are, and without them it's just not possible. And I think you know, I don't know about in your countries, but we have the Arts Council, which provides money for artists, and they have actually acted really well. They've been really nimble, and they have very much put artists at the fore. So a lot of they want freelancers to be applying to them. Doesn't matter if they've got any track record, you know, with the Arts Council applying for funding, and they're making their forms much simpler. So that's been a really positive outcome, and we want that, you know, to see that going forward. And artists have been, over the time, you know, before the pandemic, it's become much more about the artists, and particularly for us, you know, the diversity within the sector is with the younger artists, but they're also the ones that most, you know, likely to be leaving as well at this moment. So it's a, you know, it's a double bind that we're really looking to see how we can support and you know, keep them on board within the industry.
Thanks, Kumiko. Yeah, like it's just such an interesting discussion. Like, I feel like want to keep sharing, you know, our ideas. But I'll just throw to the floor now so that everyone can ask questions to you. With everyone, please feel free to turn on your cameras now. We had some really great comments come through. Everyone's been really throwing some useful, I think Jules throwing some links and some cool ideas some people had about working together. But I do have a question from Courtney. So panelists, with huge shifts in priorities happening because of the pandemic, she's keen to hear what each of you, each panelist has as their immediate priority with their company.
I mean, I would say our artists are still, that they are our immediate priority, that we have some resources. We will continue working with our artists, and you know, they will continue being creative in this period. They are being creative, but you know, we will pay them to be creative, as it were. I think we're employing nearly over 100 freelance artists for our next 2 projects that are coming up. So there's a lot, but it feels really important. And that they feel connected, you know, they're coming together to make these plays, they're coming together to put performances on. And that's really empowering, and yeah, that's needed. Yeah, so it's our artists.
I think for us, it is also about supporting artists by trying to provide pathways and mentorship and training that will help them more quickly get to a place where they can generate new work, because I think it would be great for more artists to have a voice in response to this past year and what it's meant to them and their communities. And so giving them the tools to do that, or the pathways to allow their voices to be heard more easily, which is something we're still struggling with. I think that's probably the most effective thing we can do as a tiny company. We can't actually make a lot of stuff ourselves, maybe just one little thing at a time. So it's better if we can help equip a number of other artists to do that, and in different ways.
Yeah, for us as well. I mean, our artists are our primary concern. I think that one of the things that's top of mind for us is that the work that we're doing, the work that we're creating, the training that we're embarking on with our artists is not a stopgap that exists only for this current moment. That is not just for the situation that we find ourselves in, but that it's all contributing to what the future of performance is going to be. So yeah, that we're consistently moving forward, and that the goal is always going to be a new, like it's a new way of making performance art.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exactly what everyone said. It's our artists, and how can we basically call them to action or charge them to innovate the forms. So I feel so old, but I hate Zoom theater, and I don't want to produce it, and I don't want to go to it. But I feel like there are other forms of digital theater that will happen, and there are. I mean, I did go to a Zoom show, and what was great was just even in this moment seeing all these faces that are familiar and the community that can happen and gather is great. I think the other thing that, you know, in the terms of the long game thing is that people are gonna, on the other side of this, and even now, people are gonna need help to heal and to grieve, right? I don't feel like we've done any of that. I don't feel like we've really acknowledged the loss that is happening and has happened. And I think we all know there's stress and there's tension. And I think this is why we do the work that we do, right? This is why we love our art forms, and how can we help people, get through the harder side, which is going to be the loss that continues on after the immediate crisis of the pandemic is gone. And so I think that's the thing to be, that I think we're all wrestling with, that it's going to need to be that's the way we are frontline workers, if you will.
Thank you. It's not Jules. I can actually see you right there. So do you want to turn your mic on, and would you like to ask the question to the panelists?
Oh, if there's time, that'd be great.
Yeah. It is. It's a bit, but it's a really, I think it's a good question.
Hi everyone. Yeah, thank you for this discussion. I'm having a great time. Thank you for your attendance and your insight. Hello, Kumiko. Hi.
Lovely to see you, Jules.
You as well, from across the oceans.
Yay.
I wanted to know if any of the panelists had any global calls to action that you'd like support with from different parts of the diaspora. If there's anything that you're that you're fighting for or campaigning for that we can support with.
It's interesting. I mean, here there's been a lot of work around. There's been a threefold rise in hate crime against people of East Asian, Southeast Asian heritage, particularly just before, pre the lockdown. There was a lot of when people still have out and around. There was a lot of anti-East Asian, Southeast Asian racism, and so there are groups forming, and we're sort of, as in we're supporting, and there's going to actually be a parliamentary discussion on Tuesday. So look out for that, which is really exciting. Because it's exciting. I mean, it's long overdue. The last time I think the Chinese community or any East or Southeast Asian community was discussed in Parliament was actually 1983. That was the last time it came before a parliamentary debate. So, our communities are so hidden still and so unacknowledged. So, and we've got a MP for Luton, Sarah Owen, and she's brought this to Parliament to discuss about the racism, the rise in racism, and what can be done and what Parliament can do. So that's something, and we're actually looking at terminology a lot. I don't know if you guys are doing that. There's been a lot of work here in Britain. We're labelled BAME, British Black Asian Minority Ethnic is BAME, and there's been long time a lot of people have disliked that. And that's been interesting at this time. So we're looking at people who experience racism as a terminology for people to use. I don't know if that's the same with you guys or across in Australia or States or Canada. It'd be interesting to hear. Yeah.
I think terminology is something we've all struggled with anyway.
Yeah.
And I feel that in Australia, we're starting to import a lot more terms from the United States. People of colour, now BIPOC, but there's a reluctance also to adapt it from others because the situation is not exactly the same. The history is not exactly the same, and it may or may not really be appropriate. I do think that we do need to come up with a better language and better terms. If we're going to allow ourselves to be labelled, let's use something we're more comfortable with.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, there was like so many hashtags that I was thinking of, and then I was like, Andy from East West is on this and he can tell you all the different movements, but I think, you know, the terminology thing is, I think, key to decolonizing practices. You know, us taking ownership and renaming things gives it a new identity. And I think the other thing is, you know, here in the US, but I think in all of our countries, you know, Asian American is a monolith, right? This is, you know, many countries and billions of people thrown together under one umbrella. And I think we have to keep chipping away at that in terms of it asserting identity, you know what I mean? And distinguishing our different heritages and cultures, you know, rather than this kind of being whitewashed, if you will, under an umbrella. And I think this is the time to, you know, to call people out and also change behaviors around those things.
Anyone else like to comment? I'm so aware of the time, and Snehal and David's time's getting really late, but I really want to keep talking. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm sorry if I couldn't get through to all the questions. I just want to say a big thank you to our panelists for kindly staying up late and getting up early to join us. Thank you so much to Snehal, Kumiko, David, and Annette. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Arisa. Thank you, Arisa, for bringing us together. And thanks everyone for joining us. And I myself cannot believe it's taken us this long to make this connection between the four of us. And I hope it's the beginning only, and that we can keep this connection and keep exploring perhaps ways in which we can work together or support one another.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you everyone for attending. There would be a recorded footage available later on, so please spread the word. Thank you for joining us today at the Longhouse. See you at the next one. And take care. Stay safe wherever you are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.